Lila stood in her dimly lit apartment, the city's hum a faint pulse beyond her window. Her phone glowed in her hand, casting shadows across her face as she scrolled through a parade of polished live friends on exotic vacations. Colleagues flaunting promotions, influencers with flawless smiles. At 32, she had carved a place for herself, a marketing manager with a sleek office, a wardrobe curated for envy, a life that ticked every box of success. Yet, as she paused before her floor-length mirror, her reflection felt like a stranger's. The woman staring back had eyes heavy with questions she couldn't name. She tapped her phone again, a reflex, seeking the dopamine hit of a new like or comment. Her latest post, a carefully staged photo of her morning coffee with a witty caption, had garnered 100 likes, but the number felt hollow. Each notification was a fleeting nod to her existence, yet it left her hungrier. She thought of a phrase she'd read in a worn mindfulness book tucked on her shelf. Asterisk, the self is not what it seems. It was a Buddhist idea, something about anatta, no self, but it felt distant, like a riddle she wasn't ready to solve. Her life was built on being seen by her followers, her boss, her friends. Who was she without their gaze? The mirror held her reflection steady, but her mind churned. She remembered her childhood sprawled on her grandmother's porch, listening to stories of wise travelers who shed their burdens to find peace. One tale spoke of a man carrying a heavy stone, believing it was his identity, only to discover it was just a rock. "Let go of what you think you are," her grandmother had said, "and you'll find what you can become." Lila had laughed then, too young to understand. Now the memory stirred something restless in her. Her phone buzzed a colleague's message about a missed deadline. Her stomach tightened. She was good at her job, crafting campaigns that sold dreams, but the pressure to outshine her peers was relentless. She typed a polished reply, masking her irritation, and caught her reflection again. The woman in the mirror seemed to judge her, as if saying, asterisk, is this all you are? She set the phone down, her hands trembling slightly. The weight of her ego, this carefully crafted self, was heavier than she'd realized, a cloak stitched from others' expectations, from her own need. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay in the dark, the city's lights flickering through her blinds. A dream came, vivid and strange. She stood by a still lake, its surface a perfect mirror. Her reflection gazed back, but it shifted, sometimes her face, sometimes a child's, sometimes an old woman's. She reached out and the water rippled, erasing the image. A voice, soft as a breeze, whispered, asterisk, what are you holding on to? She woke with a start, her heart racing. The dream clung to her, its question echoing. She rose and walked to her bookshelf, pulling out the Mindfulness book. Its pages spoke of anatta, the idea that the self is a story we tell, a collection of thoughts and labels, not a fixed truth. Lila traced the words, feeling a spark of curiosity. What if her ego, her need for validation, her fear of falling short was just a story? The thought was unsettling, yet it carried a strange promise, like a path hidden in the fog. She didn't understand it, not yet, but something urged her to listen. In the quiet of her apartment, she sat cross-legged on the floor, trying to breathe as the book suggested. Just breathe, just be. But her mind raced tomorrow's presentation, the client's demands, the likes she hadn't checked. She laughed softly at herself, a gentle sound in the stillness. "The mirror shows the face," she murmured, recalling an old proverb, "but the heart reveals the truth." Her heart, she realized, was tired of pretending, tired of the wait. As dawn crept through her window, Lila felt a shift, small but undeniable. She didn't need to be perfect, not in this moment. She didn't need to be the woman in the mirror, defined by others' eyes. For the first time, she wondered what it might feel like to let go not of her life, but of the story she'd been telling herself about who she had to be. The lake from her dream lingered in her mind, its ripples a quiet invitation to something deeper, something truer. The morning light softened the edges of Lila's apartment, but the restlessness from her dream lingered. She sat at her kitchen table, a steaming mug of tea untouched, her laptop open to an inbox overflowing with demands. A new email caught her eye, its subject line simple, an invitation to clarity. It was from Maya, a friend from college she hadn't spoken to in years. Maya's words were brief, almost poetic, describing a retreat in the mountains, a place to step beyond the noise and find what matters. No itinerary, no promises of luxury, just a quiet call to come. Lila's first instinct was to dismiss it. She had deadlines, meetings, a life that didn't pause for whims. Yet the dream of the lake, its shifting reflections, tugged at her. She thought of a Buddhist teaching she'd skimmed in her book, dukkha, the truth that life, when built on chasing fleeting things, breeds suffering. Her polished existence, her corner office, her curated social media, her relentless ambition felt like a treadmill she couldn't step off. Each achievement brought a fleeting high, followed by a deeper hunger. Was this the suffering the Buddha spoke of? Not pain, but a quiet, gnawing dissatisfaction? She leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Her job was her identity, her success a shield against doubt. But the shield was heavy, and cracks were forming. She remembered Maya, her free-spirited laugh, her knack for chasing meaning over status. In college, Maya had spoken of moments when life seemed to whisper, urging a leap into the unknown. Lila had rolled her eyes then, calling it naive. Now she wondered if Maya had been onto something. An old saying came to mind, asterisk, to find the path, one must step off the road. The words felt like a nudge, gentle but insistent. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed a reply, then deleted it. What was she afraid of? Missing a deadline? Losing her edge? Or was it something deeper, facing a truth she'd buried beneath her busy days? She closed her eyes, picturing the lake from her dream. Its stillness beckoned, promising nothing but presence. She opened the email again and wrote, asterisk, I'm in. 2 words, a small act of courage. She hit send before doubt could creep in. Packing was a strange ritual. She reached for her phone out of habit, then paused. The device felt like an anchor, tethering her to the world of notifications and expectations. She left it on her neat stand, a quiet rebellion against the self she'd built. A small backpack held essentials, clothes, a notebook, the mindfulness book. As she zipped it shut, she felt a flicker of freedom, like a child sneaking away from chores. The city buzzed outside, oblivious to her decision. She locked her door and stepped into the unknown. The bus to the mountains wound through valleys, each mile loosening the knot in her chest. She watched the landscape shift, skyscrapers giving way to rolling hills, then dense forests. Her mind, usually a whirl of to-do lists, began to settle. She thought of a story her grandmother once told, of a traveler who left her village to seek a treasure, only to find it was the journey itself. Lila smiled, wondering if she was chasing her own treasure, or perhaps running from a life that no longer fit. The retreat was a cluster of cabins nestled in a clearing, surrounded by pines that whispered in the breeze. A wooden sign read "Stillness awaits." Lila stepped off the bus, her boots crunching on gravel. A handful of others arrived, their faces a mix of curiosity and weariness. No one rushed, no one checked their phones. The air felt different here, lighter, as if the mountains held space for something her city life couldn't. She inhaled deeply, the scent of earth grounding her. A woman approached, her gray hair braided, her smile warm. "Welcome, Lila," she said, as if they'd met before. "I'm Maya's aunt, here to guide you to your cabin." Lila nodded, struck by the woman's calm. She followed her down a path, the forest alive with birdsong. Her cabin was simple: a bed, a desk, a window framing the mountains. On the desk lay a single note, "Be here just as you are." Lila read it twice, feeling its weight. For years she'd been anything but herself, shaping her life to fit others' molds. As dusk fell, she sat on the cabin's porch, the sky a canvas of fading gold. The retreat hadn't begun, yet something was already stirring. Dukkha, she thought, the suffering of clinging to illusions. Her illusion was control, the belief that more likes, more titles, more anything would fill the emptiness. Here, in the quiet, she felt the first stirrings of a question. What if she let go? Not of her life, but of the need to prove it. The mountains stood silent, their presence an answer she wasn't yet ready to hear. The mountain air was crisp as Lila stepped out of her cabin, the dawn painting the sky in soft pinks. The retreat's first morning gathered the group in a clearing, where a circle of cushions waited beneath an ancient oak. She settled onto one, her legs crossed, her hands restless in her lap. Around her, others sat in silence, their faces a blend of hope and uncertainty, much like her own. The quiet felt unfamiliar, almost heavy, after years of city noise and constant scrolling. She wondered if she'd made a mistake, leaving her phone, her life for this. A figure approached, moving with a stillness that seemed to hush the morning breeze. It was Amara, a monk in simple robes, her eyes holding a warmth that felt like an invitation. She sat at the circle's center, her presence grounding, like a stone in a stream. "Welcome," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Here we learn to listen not to the world, but to ourselves." Lila shifted, unsure what that meant. Her mind was a tangle of thoughts, work emails, the dream of the lake, the weight of her own expectations. Amara spoke of vipassana, a practice of seeing things as they are, without clinging or pushing away. "Your mind tells stories," she said, "and you believe them. But what if you just watch them, like clouds passing?" Lila frowned, her thoughts racing. Watch her mind? It was her mind that kept her sharp, successful, in control. Yet, as Amara led them into meditation, asking them to focus on their breath, Lila felt the storm inside her stir. Her inhale was shallow, her exhale rushed. Her thoughts darted deadlines, her last post's likes, a client's critique. She opened her eyes, glancing at the others. They seemed calm, their faces serene. Her chest tightened. Why couldn't she do this? Amara's gaze met hers, gentle, without judgment. Notice the thought, Amara said, as if speaking to her alone, but don't become it. Lila closed her eyes again, trying. A memory surfaced her grandmother years ago, telling her a story of a weaver who spun tailies so vivid she forgot the world beyond her loom. Don't get lost in your own threads, her grandmother had warned. Lila's threads were her ambitions, her fears, her need to be seen. She focused on her breath again, feeling it catch, then soften. The Buddhist teaching of anatta flickered in her mind, no self. The idea that her thoughts weren't her, just passing waves. But if she wasn't her thoughts, who was she? The question felt like a pebble dropped into the lake of her dream, sending ripples she couldn't follow. Her mind wandered again to a presentation she'd nailed last month, the applause, the fleeting pride. Was that her? Or was it another story, one she'd told herself to feel whole? Amara's voice returned, steady as a heartbeat. When the mind races, return to the breath. It's always here, waiting. Lila tried, her breath a fragile anchor. She noticed her frustration, her urge to be good at this, to succeed even at meditation. A soft laugh escaped her lips. Even here, her ego was trying to win. A proverb her grandmother loved came to mind. Asterisk in silence, the truth speaks loudest. She let the words settle, feeling their weight. Silence wasn't just the absence of noise, it was a space where her stories might unravel. The meditation ended, but Lila lingered on her cushion, the group dispersing quietly. Amara approached, her steps light on the grass. "It's hard, isn't it?" she said, her smile kind. Lila nodded, unsure how to explain the chaos in her head. "Your mind is like a river," Amara said. "It flows, sometimes wild, sometimes still. Don't fight it. Just sit by its banks and watch." Lila thought of the lake in her dream, its shifting reflections. Was her mind like that, always changing, never fixed? That afternoon, Lila walked a forest path, the trees towering like silent teachers. She tried to practice what Amara taught, noticing her thoughts without chasing them. A memory of a failed campaign surfaced, the sting of her boss's words. Instead of pushing it away, she let it be, like a leaf floating past. It was uncomfortable, but there was a strange relief in not fighting it. The forest seemed to agree, its quiet hum, a reminder that the world didn't demand her perfection. As evening fell, the group gathered again, sharing simple tea. Lila listened to other stories, a man escaping a toxic job, a woman grieving a lost parent. Their openness stirred her. She'd always hidden her struggles, crafting a facade of confidence. But here, in this circle, truth felt safer. She spoke, her voice soft, about her dream, the lake, the question it left her. The group listened, their silence a gift. Amara nodded, her eyes bright. "The truth begins when you stop running from it," she said. Lila felt the words land like a seed in soft earth. The retreat's second day dawned with a gentle mist, cloaking the mountains in a soft hush. Lila sat in the circle again, the oak's branches swaying overhead as Amara introduced a new practice. "Today," she said, her voice a steady hum, "we share and listen, not to judge but to understand." The group was tasked with speaking about their struggles, a practice rooted in metta, loving kindness, which Amara described as a heart open to others' joys and sorrows. Lila's fingers fidgeted with the edge of her cushion. Sharing felt raw, like peeling back a layer she'd spent years polishing. One by one, the group spoke. A man named Daniel, with a quiet intensity, shared his exhaustion from years of chasing corporate success, only to feel empty. A woman named Sarah spoke of her fear of failing as a mother, her voice breaking. Each story landed gently, like leaves on water, and Lila felt a warmth in their honesty. Then came Elise, a young artist with a serene glow. She spoke of finding peace in her work, of moments when her brush moved as if guided by something greater. Her calm was magnetic, her words effortless, and Lila felt a pang sharp, familiar, unwelcome. Envy curled in her chest. Why did Elise seem so at ease, so sure of her place? Lila's mind spun, comparing her own restless thoughts to Elise's quiet grace. She'd felt this before scrolling through perfect lives online, measuring herself against colleagues who seemed to have it all. The Buddhist teaching of metta felt distant now, a lofty ideal against the grit of her jealousy. She shifted on her cushion, wishing she could shrink into the earth. Amara's eyes met hers, gentle but piercing, as if she saw the storm within. Metta begins with seeing, Amara said, as the sharing paused. See your heart, even its shadows, and offer it kindness. She guided them into a meditation, asking them to picture someone they admired, then wish them well. Lila chose Elise reluctantly. May you be happy, she thought, the words stiff at first. Her mind resisted, flashing to Elise's calm smile, her effortless peace. But as she repeated the phrase, something softened. She saw Elise not as a rival, but as someone carrying her own unseen burdens. A story her grandmother once told came to mind, of two farmers gazing at each other's fields. One envied the other's green pastures, not seeing the weeds hidden beneath. The grass is greener where you water it, her grandmother had said, a simple truth that now felt profound. Lila's envy was her own creation, a story her ego told to keep her small. She breathed deeply, picturing Elise again. May you be free from suffering. The words flowed easier now, like a stream finding its course. After the meditation, Amara invited questions. Lila hesitated, then spoke, her voice low. What if I'm jealous of someone's peace? How do I stop? The group's silence held no judgment, only space. Amara smiled, her eyes crinkling. Jealousy is a mirror, she said. It shows what you long for, not what they have. Offer kindness to that longing and it softens. Lila nodded, the words sinking in. Her envy wasn't about Elise. It was about her own hunger for peace, a peace she'd buried under ambition and comparison. That afternoon, Lila walked to a nearby stream, its gentle gurgle a companion to her thoughts. She sat on a smooth rock, watching the water dance over pebbles. Metta, she realized, wasn't just for others, it was for herself too. She'd spent years judging herself, chasing a version of Lila that never felt enough. What if she wished herself well, just as she was? She closed her eyes, whispering, asterisk, may I be kind to myself. The words felt foreign, but they carried a quiet power, like a seed breaking open. As evening fell, the group gathered for tea again, the air warm with camaraderie. Lila watched Elise, no longer with envy, but with curiosity. She approached her, asking about her art. Elise's eyes lit up, and she spoke of her struggles, her doubts, her moments of feeling lost. Lila listened, surprised by their shared humanity. The Buddhist teaching of interconnectedness flickered in her mind. Her pain, Elise's pain, all part of the same tapestry. She felt lighter, as if a knot in her heart had loosened. The stars emerged, bright against the mountain sky. Lila stood alone for a moment, breathing in the night. She thought of her life back in the city, the endless race to outshine, to be better than. Here, in this quiet, she saw it for what it was, a game her ego played, keeping her trapped. Metta was a way out, a path of kindness that began with facing her own shadows. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time she felt ready to ask the questions. The morning sun filtered through the pines, casting dappled light across the retreat's wooden hall. Lila sat at a small desk, a blank notebook before her, its pages daunting in their emptiness. Amara had given the group a task: write your life story, but as if your ego, the part that craves titles, applause, and proof of worth, didn't exist. Lila's pen hovered, her mind frozen. Who was she without her job, her achievements, the carefully crafted image she'd built? The question felt like stepping off a cliff, the ground vanishing beneath her. She glanced around, seeing others scribble with ease, their pens dancing across the pages. Her chest tightened, a familiar fear, rising fear of not being enough, of failing even at this simple exercise. She wrote a sentence: "I am a marketing manager." Then she stopped, the words feeling hollow. Was that all she was? Her mind flashed to her corner office, the promotions she'd chased, the likes on her posts. Each was a brick in the wall of her identity. Yet here, in this quiet hall, that wall felt fragile. Amara's voice broke the silence, gentle as ever. "Write as if nothing you've built defines you," she said. "What remains?" Lila's pen trembled. She thought of the Buddhist teaching of anicca impermanence, the truth that all things pass, from achievements to pain. Her job, her status, even her fears weren't fixed. They were waves rising and falling. But if they weren't her, what was? She closed her eyes, picturing the lake from her dream, its surface rippling, never holding one reflection for long. A memory surfaced unbidden. She was 10, sitting on her grandmother's porch, weaving bracelets from wildflowers. There was no goal, no audience, just the joy of threading stems together. She wrote, "I loved making things, not for praise, but for the making." The words felt true, like a glimpse of a Lila she'd forgotten. She kept writing, slowly at first, then faster. Moments of laughter with friends, quiet mornings with coffee, the thrill of solving a problem, not for the win, but for the puzzle itself. These were pieces of her, untied to titles or likes. Her pen paused again. Another memory came, sharper. A year ago, she'd lost a major client, her confidence crumbling under her boss's critique. She'd spent weeks rebuilding her image, proving she was still the best. That Layla, the one who needed to be seen as perfect, felt so real then. Now she saw her as a shadow, a story spun by her ego to keep her safe. Anicca, she thought. That pain had passed, as had the triumph of her next success. Neither defined her, not truly. Amara walked among them, her presence calm, like a breeze settling dust. She stopped by Lila, glancing at the notebook. "Hard, isn't it?" she murmured. Lila nodded, her throat tight. "It's like the mirror breaks," Amara said, "and you see the world as it is." Lila recalled the proverb, its truth sinking deeper now. Her ego was the mirror, reflecting a self she'd polished for the world. Without it, what did she see? Not failure, not success, just Lila, raw and unfinished. She wrote again, her words less certain but more honest. I am someone who tries, who doubts, who keeps going. The sentences felt clumsy, but they carried a quiet strength. She thought of a story her grandmother told, of a river that carved a canyon, not by force, but by flowing year after year. Her life didn't need to be a monument. It could be a river, moving, changing, alive. The thought loosened something in her chest, a knot she'd carried too long. As the exercise ended, the group shared snippets of their stories. Lila listened, struck by their vulnerability, a teacher who loved learning, a father who cherished his daughter's laughter. When her turn came, she spoke softly. I thought I was my job, my wins. But maybe I'm just someone who's here trying to understand. The words felt exposed, but the group's nods were a gentle embrace. Amara smiled, her eyes bright. That's a beginning, she said. Lila walked to her cabin, the notebook tucked under her arm. The forest was alive with bird song, each note fleeting, yet perfect. Annika, she thought again. Her achievements, her failures, her carefully curated self, they were all impermanent, like bird song in the wind. The realization didn't erase her fears, but it softened them. She didn't need to cling to the story of Lila the manager, Lila the star. She could just be Lila for now, and that was enough. The afternoon sun warmed her as she sat on her porch, flipping through her notebook. The pages held a new story, not polished, but true. She felt lighter, as if the mirror of her ego had cracked, letting light through the gaps. The lake from her dream lingered in her mind, its ripples no longer a puzzle, but a promise that change was not loss, but life itself. The retreat's days began to blur, each one a gentle unfolding, like petals in the morning light. Lila sat by her cabin's window, her notebook open, its pages now a patchwork of thoughts and questions. The writing exercise had left her raw, as if she'd peeled back a layer of herself she'd long hidden. She felt lighter, yet exposed, like a tree shedding leaves in autumn. Amara's next teaching was about right speech, a Buddhist principle of speaking with truth and kindness, not just to others, but to oneself. Lila turned the idea over in her mind, wondering what her own truth sounded like. Amara gathered the group beneath the oak, the air cool with the promise of evening. Words shape our world, she said, her voice steady as a river's flow. They can build walls or bridges. Speak what is true, but let kindness guide you. Lila thought of her life in the city, her polished emails, her witty social media captions, her careful deflections when asked how she was. Her words had always been a mask, hiding doubts she feared would make her seem weak. Right speech felt like a challenge to lower that mask, and the thought made her heart race. Amara shared a fable, one Lila's grandmother might have loved. A king wore a golden mask to hide his flaws, but its weight crushed him until he spoke his truth and cast it aside. Truth is a light that burns the mask away, Amara said, echoing an old saying Lila now held close. She handed each person a journal, asking them to write a letter to themselves, one that spoke their deepest fears without judgment. Lila's pen hovered, her mind resisting. What was she afraid to say, even to herself? She began slowly, her words halting. Asterisk, I'm afraid I'm not enough, that I'll fail, that I'll be forgotten. The sentences felt heavy, like stones she'd carried for years. She wrote of sleepless nights worrying about work, of moments she'd smiled through disappointment, of the ache to be seen as perfect. Each word was a confession, raw and unfiltered. She thought of the lake from her dream, its ripples revealing new reflections. Writing these truths was like touching that water, letting it shift what she saw. As she wrote, a memory surfaced at dinner with colleagues, where she'd laughed off a mistake to save face, though it gnawed at her later. She'd always hidden her missteps, fearing they'd unravel her carefully built image. But here, in the quiet of the retreat, that image felt like the king's golden mask, beautiful, but suffocating. Right speech, Amara had said, began with honesty to oneself. Lila wrote, "I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be here." The words were simple, yet they felt like a release, a breath she'd been holding too long. The group shared their letters in pairs, a practice Amara called speaking to be heard. Lila paired with Daniel, the man who'd spoken of his corporate burnout. His voice was soft as he read his fears of never finding purpose, of being defined by his job. Lila listened, her heart opening, seeing her own struggles in his. When her turn came, she hesitated, then read her letter, her voice trembling but steady. Daniel nodded, his eyes kind. "I get it," he said. "It's hard to let go of who we think we're supposed to be." Amara joined them, her presence a quiet anchor. "Truth spoken with kindness frees you," she said. "It's not about being flawless, it's about being whole." Lila felt the words settle like a warm hand on her shoulder. She thought of her life back home, where vulnerability was a risk, where perfection was the currency of worth. Here, in this circle, truth was enough. She didn't need to hide her doubts or polish her fears. They were part of her, as fleeting as the clouds Amara had described. That evening, Lila walked to the stream again, its gentle murmur a mirror to her thoughts. She sat on the same rock, her journal open, and wrote a new line. "I am enough, just as I am." The words felt fragile, but true, like a seedling breaking through soil. She thought of her grandmother's stories, of travelers who found freedom not in reaching a destination, but in speaking their hearts. Right speech wasn't just words, it was living honestly, letting her truth shine without fear. As the stars emerged, Lila felt a shift, subtle but deep. The mask she'd worn, crafted from ambition, from the need to be seen, was beginning to crack. Each honest word, each moment of vulnerability, was a step toward something lighter. The lake from her dream lingered in her mind, its surface no longer a puzzle, but a guide, reflecting a self she was beginning to know. The city greeted Lila with its familiar pulse horns blaring, screens flashing, the air thick with urgency. She stepped off the bus, her backpack lighter than when she'd left, though her heart carried a new weight, a quiet resolve. The retreat had ended, but its lessons lingered like echoes of the mountain's stillness. Back in her apartment, the mirror stood unchanged, yet the woman it reflected felt different. She wasn't transformed, not in the way she'd once chased transformation, new diets, new goals, new versions of herself. This was subtler, a shift in how she saw. Her first day back at work was a test. Her desk overflowed with papers, her inbox a cascade of demands. A colleague, Tom, had fumbled a presentation in her absence, leaving a client frustrated. Lila's old self would have snapped, her ego bristling at the mess. Instead, she paused, remembering Amara's teaching of karuna compassion, the act of meeting suffering with kindness. Tom's face was tense, his eyes downcast. She thought of a proverb her grandmother loved: "A single ripple can calm a stormy lake." Could she be that ripple even here in the chaos of her world? She approached Tom, her voice soft. "Rough day, huh? Let's fix it together." His surprise mirrored her own. The words weren't strategic, not meant to impress. They were honest, born from a wish to ease his burden. They spent an hour reworking the presentation, her suggestions gentle, his gratitude unspoken but clear. As they parted, Lila felt a warmth, a connection she'd rarely allowed in her race to outshine. Karuna, she realized, wasn't grand gestures. It was these small acts, quiet as a breath. The city's rhythm pulled at her, tempting her back to old habits. Her phone, reclaimed from her nightstand, buzzed with notifications. She scrolled, catching glimpses of curated lives, but the pull was weaker now. She posted nothing, choosing instead to text Maya, thanking her for the retreat. Maya's reply was a simple heart emoji, yet it felt like a bridge between her old life and the one she was beginning to imagine. She thought of the lake from her dream, its ripples spreading outward. Her actions, however small, could ripple too. At home, Lila noticed her neighbor, an older woman who often sat alone on her balcony. They'd never spoken beyond polite nods. Moved by a quiet impulse, Lila knocked on her door, offering a spare mug of tea. The woman, Clara, invited her in. Her apartment a cozy maze of books and faded photos. They talked for an hour, Clara sharing stories of her youth, Lila listening with a presence she hadn't known she possessed. As she left, Clara's smile lingered in her mind, a reminder that connection was a gift, not a transaction. The Buddhist teaching of interconnectedness wove through her days. At work, she praised a junior colleague's idea in a meeting, watching their confidence bloom. On the subway, she gave her seat to a tired stranger, their grateful nod a silent exchange. Each act chipped away at the walls her ego had built, walls that kept her separate, striving, alone. She wasn't perfect and patience crept in, old doubts whispered, but karuna was a practice, not a destination. Each kind act was a step, softening the edges of her need to be more. One evening, Lila sat by her window, the city's lights a constellation below. She opened her notebook, its pages now a map of her journey. She wrote of Tom, Clara, the strangers she'd met, with kindness. Each moment felt like a pebble tossed into the lake of her life, its ripples spreading beyond her sight. She recalled a story Amara had shared of a monk who gave his only meal to a hungry traveler, finding joy in the giving. Lila hadn't given up her meals, but she was giving up something heavier, her need to be the center, the best, the one who mattered most. Her phone lay silent, its screen dark. She didn't need its validation tonight. Instead, she thought of the retreat, of Amara's quiet wisdom, of the group's shared stories. They were all ripples, touching one another in ways unseen. Lila's heart felt fuller, not from achievement, but from connection. She wasn't free of her ego, not yet, but its grip was loosening, like a knot slowly undone. The lake from her dream shimmered in her mind, its surface calm, reflecting a world where kindness was enough. The city's hum was softer now, or perhaps Lila heard it differently. Weeks had passed since the retreat, and her apartment, once a stage for her curated life, felt more like a sanctuary. She sat cross-legged on her rug, a candle flickering, her notebook open to a page where she'd scribbled Amara's final teaching, The Eightfold Path, a guide to living with mindfulness and heart. It wasn't a rule book, Amara had said, but a map for navigating life's chaos with clarity. Lila traced the words, feeling their quiet promise. Her days were still full meetings, deadlines, the endless pulse of the city, but she moved through them with a new rhythm. The Eightfold Path began with right view, seeing life as it was, not as her ego wished it to be. She noticed her old habits, checking her phone for validation, measuring herself against others, but now she paused, breathing into the moment. A colleague's sharp email no longer sparked defensiveness. She read it, let it be, and responded with calm. The Buddhist truth of anicca, impermanence, reminded her that no moment, good or bad, was fixed. At work, she practiced right intention, choosing actions rooted in kindness rather than ambition. When a project faltered, she didn't rush to prove herself. Instead, she listened to her team, their ideas weaving into something stronger than her solo efforts. She thought of an old saying her grandmother loved, asterisk, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Each choice to act with care, to listen rather than compete, was a step toward a life that felt truer. Her ego still whispered, "You need to shine," but its voice was softer now, less commanding. Right speech, which she'd tasted at the retreat, became a daily practice. She caught herself before snapping at a tardy coworker, choosing words that built rather than broke. At home, she called her parents, not to report successes, but to ask about their days, their stories filling her with a warmth she'd forgotten. Right action followed, small gestures that rippled outward, sharing lunch with a struggling intern, leaving a kind note for Clara, her neighbor. These acts didn't erase her doubts, but they grounded her like roots reaching into soft earth. Her phone, once a tether to her ego, became just a tool. She scrolled less, not out of discipline, but because the need to be seen had faded. When she posted, it was simple, a photo of a sunset, a caption about gratitude. The likes came, but they didn't define her. She thought of the lake from her dream, its surface steady now, reflecting not just her face, but the sky, the trees, the world. The Eightfold Path taught her to live in that reflection, present, connected, alive. One evening, Lila walked to a park near her apartment, the city's lights fading into dusk. She sat by a small pond, its water catching the last rays of sun. A story Amara had told came to mind, of a traveler who carried a heavy load until she realized the path itself was her destination. Lila's load, her need for approval, her fear of failing, was lighter now, not gone, but easier to carry. The Eightfold Path wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, moment by moment, with an open heart. She opened her notebook, writing a single line, asterisk, I'm enough, and so is this moment. The words felt like a vow, not to be someone new, but to be herself, fully, without the mask. She thought of the retreat, of Amara's gentle eyes, of the group's shared silences. They were part of her now, woven into her days. The city buzzed around her, but she felt still, like the pond before her, its surface calm, its depths unseen. As she walked home, the stars began to emerge, each a tiny light in the vast night. Lila smiled, her steps light. She wasn't enlightened, not in the way she'd once imagined enlightenment, a grand, final state. She was just Lila, walking her path, one truthful moment at a time. The lake from her dream was with her still, its ripples a reminder that life was change, and she could flow with it. She didn't have all the answers, but she had a direction, and for now, that was enough.